1. For a bit of background, I am a 17-year-old female and I have a boyfriend with whom I spend a great amount of time. I live in Central Europe. I live in a small house with my parents. The house has a driveway which is separated from the street by a huge gate that has an electrical remote but can be opened by key as well. This may not seem relevant, but trust me, it is. Not that I live in a dangerous area, but there was and still is a fairly large problem with gypsies, as most of them just don't seem to fit into normal society. For example, a few of them once attacked and tried to rob my brother because they saw him buying something in the street market and knew he had money on him. Fortunately, he was cautious and strong enough to fight them off. Anyway, I usually spend my evenings with my boyfriend, either at his house or mine. The evening of this event, I took the bus to my village from his and got off just as usual. It was around 9 p.m, so it was pretty dark by this point. To get to my house, I have to walk a few stairs from the bus stop, then turn left, walk for a bit, cross a different street, and walk down a hill. The whole way from the bus to my house takes about 5 minutes. So I walk down the stairs and turn to the left, where there are some trash containers. Now, I don't know if this is in other countries as well, but we have separate containers for different kinds of trash like glass, paper, etc. in most villages. In this particular place, there's no container for mixed trash, food or anything like that, just glass, paper and plastic. As I walk by them, I look to my left and see a gypsy man going through the garbage. We instantly lock eyes and he makes this crazy grin and kind of stops in the middle of his job. I walk away, not looking back, until I hear glass breaking. He stood up, and as I glared back, he grinned once again and started to walk towards me. I quicken my pace and cross the street. As I start going down the hill, I hear his footsteps get louder and louder as he's getting closer. I'm about to cry at this moment, but I hold it in. I take out my phone and text my boyfriend. If I send you a heart emoji, call the fucking cops to my address. The heart emoji is the one I had set as our main emoji in the messenger. He starts freaking out and calls me several times. I never pick up. Looking back, I should have, because it might have scared the man off. I almost see my house and start to feel a bit relieved, but then I realize the fucking gate. I only have 2 options. 1, open it with a key. 2, ring the house bell and hope for the best. I try searching small pockets of my bag, but keys are nowhere to be found. I decide to look back for a second and find the man just a few meters behind. He's not grinning anymore. He seems more angry. I finally reach the gate and ring the bell, just about 10,000 fucking times, when my father finally opens the main door and asks me, "Where have you been so long?" in a funny, ironic way. I'm still there, still behind the gate. But the man is now just about 2 meters away. I scream, "Open, what the fuck is wrong with you?" and I start to cry. He sighs for a sec, but then probably realizes what is wrong and pushes the remote so quick I don't even notice. The gate starts opening just as a man passes by. I'm crying, but trying not to let the man know. I push myself through the gap between the gate and the fence. I finally feel safe, until I hear a faint whisper I'll never forget. "You run better next time." I collapse at the door. Dad tries to follow the guy, but he stands no chance because the man is long gone. We didn't call the cops since I didn't remember the man that much, and I wouldn't be able to give them a description. And it would have been no help. Ever since that, I'm afraid of walking in the dark and paranoid of someone watching me. I know my fear is unfounded, if I actually want, because it makes me aware of my surroundings more. Anyway, creepy guy from the trash, let's never ever meet again. 2. So this happened this past spring. I was working front desk at a hotel. I worked the afternoon shift from 3 to 10 p.m, so I mostly got people checking in. I actually loved my job, but this was the first time I had ever worked at a hotel, and the first time I had ever experienced something like this, so it really put me on guard. And that night, we had 2 rooms left available. I was trying to sell those last rooms pretty quickly, so that we could just be sold out for the night. To clarify for anyone who is unfamiliar with the hotel industry, usually the front desk agents are authorized to discount rooms if it means it will bring in more business. Not over-the-top discounts, but my boss personally trusted us to use discretion. Anyways, so these 2 dudes walk in around 7 or 7:30. By this time it was only me and one maintenance dude on duty, but I didn't know where the maintenance guy was. Essentially, it was just me on duty at the front desk. These guys looked normal. 2 younger black guys dressed really nice. They asked for the room prices, and we were running pretty pricey that night. So one of the dudes says he is going to run out and call his buddy to see if that price was okay. I wanted these rooms gone, so I start negotiating with the other guy. He is talking me down, and I am being fairly generous with my offers of discounts. Finally, I say, alright, I will give you X price if you guys give us your business tonight. Or something along those lines. After I said that, he got kinda closer to me and said, "Wow, you really want us here tonight, don't you?" I was shocked at the flirty change in tone, but blamed myself for phrasing it that way. I don't remember my response, but right then, the friend came back in, and the guy I was with just told him that I'd given them a discount, and they checked in. Then the friend kinda wandered up to the room, while the other guy hung around until his friend was gone. Then things started to get weird. He told me the only reason he agreed to stay here wasn't because of the discount, but actually because he thought I was hinting that I wanted to hang out with him and I wanted him to stay. He kept asking when I was off over and over. I just stayed professional and said that I had a boyfriend, which I did, and wasn't interested. He finally gave up and went up to his room. About half an hour passed, and all of a sudden, while I was on the phone, he wandered back down into the lobby wearing PJs. He sat down in the couches opposite me, and just sat on his phone and kept looking up at me, smiling. I pretended to be very busy on this phone call, and when they hung up, I called the hotel phone from my cell phone and pretended to be on the phone for a second. That backfired when I got an actual phone call. It was a wrong number, and I hung up, which was when he made his move. He asked for my number and then proceeded to tell me he wanted me to come up to his room after this shift. No. Then he asked if I wanted to meet after work and smoke weed with him. I kept saying no, I had a boyfriend, and his response was always, "Well, he ain't here, girl. It's just us right now." I was thoroughly creeped out at how relentless he was. I finally just got the balls to tell him to leave me alone, or I would have to call security. This pissed him off apparently, and his tone changed 180 degrees. He got really defensive and said he was just trying to get to know me. Then he started aggressively climbing and reaching over the counter to try and grab me. I screamed, and that made him even angrier. He yelled, "Shut up, bitch!" And at that moment a family came out of the pool area. It spooked him, and he ran out into the parking lot. The family saw I was breathing heavy, and had seen the guy run, so they stood with me while I called my maintenance guy to come. We eventually called the cops and my manager, and after looking at the security tapes and hearing my story, they kicked him and his friend out. I was scared of those dudes for a while after that. I really hope we don't meet again. 3. Prologue. I live in a small town in the southern Appalachians. Crime is low, and overall it's a very safe place. Recently I made the acquaintance of a guy I'll call Matthew, whose family is from around here. He'd moved back to town after a bad car accident and some issues with his last girlfriend. There was nothing particularly off-putting about him. He had a tendency to ramble, but then again, so do I. Overall, he was friendly, personable, and enjoyed talking about a lot of different subjects. I liked his company, and he was without transportation, so I ended up being his ride to and from the local bar. One time, I took him back to the trailer where he'd recently found a room for rent. Before we got there, Matthew gave me kind of a weird warning about his landlord. It didn't make much sense ahead of time. Something about said landlord being really intense and aggressive. I wasn't planning on staying long. Good idea in retrospect. And figured if things got weird, I could just say a quick goodbye and ease my way out. Looking back on it now, I'm still not sure what was going on in that trailer. It was fairly seedy and the living room was pretty sparsely decorated. Couch, coffee table, a few chairs, some wall hangings, and a fairly prominent Insane Clown Posse poster. Definitely not my kind of scene, but I didn't want to hurt Matthew's feelings by turning on my heel and walking out immediately. His landlord radiated a kind of terrifying friendliness, as though someone had taught him the concept of being a good host, but hadn't informed him that cocaine was also a hell of a drug. There was another housemate of theirs who kept to himself out on the porch. Said housemate and I exchanged maybe 3 words the entire time I was there. There was also, for lack of a better word, a couple on one of the chairs. They seemed to be under the influence of one or several substances, and the female half of the couple was in the process of losing her clothes. I don't mean she was undressing so much as her clothes appeared to be sagging off of her body in slow motion. She split her time between asking incoherent questions and yelling at the radio. Once I had finished the obligatory beer the landlord had given me when I arrived, I took my leave using my all-time favorite excuse of having to get dinner ready. Matthew called me later that night to apologize. He was fairly certain that the girl and perhaps her partner were on meth, and went on to say that her partner might have been trying to pimp her out. I suggested he might want to try to find another place to live. He shrugged it off, pointing out that his rent was insanely low, and he needed to get back on his feet and didn't have anywhere else to go. I dropped the matter. I'd said my piece, and it was his life and his choice. That being said, I did resolve to never go inside that trailer again. I broke that promise to myself a week later. The night in question. On this particular night, I picked up Matthew at Shea Creepy Trailer on the outskirts of town. The bar I like to frequent is right in the middle of town, maybe 2 or 3 minutes away by car. Within less than an hour, he ended up at a table outside on the patio with 3 people I didn't recognize. I figured at least one of them was a friend of his, and didn't pay them much mind as I was hanging out with several other people I knew. Things got progressively, if slowly, weirder throughout the night, as various people approached me and asked about the people Matthew was sitting with. "Do you know any of those people?" one lady asked. "Yeah, Matthew, the guy in the hat," I said. "He's cool." "Who are those other people with him? They gave me the creeps." I turned and looked. 2 guys, one taller, one shorter. The tall guy had something close to dreads, and the short guy had the kind of facial hair normally associated with college freshmen. There was also a girl with them, who wasn't particularly remarkable in any way, other than the fact that she had awful teeth. I didn't see much of her later on, though whether this was a good or a bad thing, I'm not entirely sure. Another friend of mine had a more outspoken opinion on the subject. "Do you know any of those fuckers at that table?" he growled at me. Said friend is a biker-looking dude who happens to like me. I know that he once held a would-be burglar at gunpoint, so my affection for him is tinged with no small amount of respect. "Yeah, Matthew," I said, in a great display of originality. "The guy in the hat." Who are those other assholes with him? Scary friend wanted to know. I don't like the way they look. Matter of fact, I kind of want to hit them over the head with a beer bottle. I commiserated with him over the sad state of prior restraint laws, and went back to blissful summertime outdoor drinking. Not too long after, Matthew called me. I glanced over at his table. He wasn't there. I figured he had pocket-dialed me and answered the phone. Dude, I'm messed up. His voice was slurred. I'd seen him consume 2, maybe 3 beers. He sounded like someone who'd downed half a bottle of whiskey. I asked him where he was, and he told me he was just up the street, outside an antique store. I left the bar and found Matthew sitting outside the store on a bench, vomiting onto the sidewalk. From his fragmented sentences, he was able to tell me that he thought he'd been drugged, and that he was hallucinating. Based on what he told me, I thought there was a decent chance he'd been given a date rape drug. I managed to help a staggering and disoriented Matthew to my car. Before we were able to leave the bar parking lot, he had to open his door and vomited onto the ground outside. I remember him moaning, "Dude, I threw up blood." He got agitated when I told him I wanted to take him to the emergency room, insisting that he couldn't go there. Perhaps I'm bad, or at least a weak person, but I'd never had an experience remotely similar to this, and my friend was begging me to take him home so he could sleep it off. I wasn't thinking clearly myself, so I drove him back to Shea Creepy Trailer. He didn't make it inside, at least not at first. I tried to help him indoors, but he laid down on the porch, leaning over the side to half spit, half vomit what was left of his stomach contents onto the gravel driveway. I went inside and got him a towel and a glass of water, forcing him to sit up so he didn't aspirate whatever was coming up his esophagus. When he started losing consciousness, I finally made the intelligent decision to call 911 and let them handle the quickly deteriorating situation. Matthew cursed at me as I made the call, but lost consciousness before I finished talking to the 911 dispatcher. Time passed. Matthew woke up enough to stumble inside. Sitting down on the same chair the meth addict couple had been cuddling on the week before. He lost consciousness a second time, this time telling me I was a bad friend for calling the rescue squad. 20 minutes and half an eternity later, the EMTs showed up, with a town police officer and a state trooper. I explained the situation as best I could. By this point, Matthew was awake enough to tell all and sundry that he hadn't been drugged, thanks buddy, and that he'd just had too many beers at the bar. Then his landlord came home. Maybe I'm an overly charitable person, but if I returned to my house to find a housemate surrounded by medical personnel and police officers, my first question would be, is my housemate okay? The landlord opted to turn to the police officers and demand to know what the hell they were doing there. His manner was belligerent, bordering on overtly hostile. To their credit, the police officers took the landlord aside in a calm and professional fashion. I couldn't hear anything that any of them said, but I listened to the landlord's tone go very quickly, from unfriendly to smarmy. It was like listening to the class bully convince a gullible teacher that you volunteered at a soup kitchen on weekends. The EMTs, meanwhile, had decided that Matthew's blood pressure, heart rate, and so forth were pretty normal. Without a trip to the ER and a drug test, there wouldn't be any way to determine what, if anything, he had ingested that would have caused hallucinations and vomiting. Matthew, for his part, was adamantly against taking a ride in an ambulance. The EMTs told the police officers they had another call to get to, and that Matthew should be fine in the morning. Once the EMTs had left, I turned to the 2 policemen. Is it okay if I go? The state trooper is actually someone that I know as a friend, outside of his duties as a police officer. He pulled me aside. Not only are you free to go, If I were you, I'd leave now," he said quietly, while nodding at the landlord's door. It was only then that I noticed that the door was padlocked from the outside. I took his advice. I left. To this day, I have no idea what was going on in that trailer, or that padlocked room, and to be honest, I don't really want to know. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 137. Thank you very much to the individuals who allowed me to use their stories. I very much appreciate the time you took to write them and share them on Reddit, and the kindness in allowing me to share them with my own audience. Okay, let's see, where are we? We're at Wednesday here, so hopefully you've already enjoyed yesterday's video. And just an update on the Halloween video. I was going to do a double-length Halloween video. That would have been 10 stories. That became 20. Those 20 became 30. And yeah, so on Friday, even though it's turned out to be way more work than I anticipated, we're going to have a 30 stories paranormal spectacular special. I haven't settled on an exact name yet, but that's what we've got for Friday. And I think that's the best day to upload it rather than dumping it on Monday. As I usually do with all my videos, especially the longer videos, timestamps, so you can listen to a few, then come back, because YouTube doesn't always save your place, but you can just click on where you were. Or you can skip the stories you're not enjoying or you've heard before, or there are a couple in there that are kind of similar in tone that I included because I think they're good for contrast. It's good to see how certain things are very similar throughout a number of stories, like people who have no connection to each other, but they've had these similar experiences. So I wanted to include those for that reason. And I believe there's also a hellhound in one of them. So that should be interesting, and hopefully you all enjoy it. Now, like I say, I wasn't planning on doing a video this big for Halloween. It was just going to be a double-length video. And at the moment, I'm not done recording yet, but at the moment it's about 2 hours. And I've got 10 stories still to record. So we'll see where it tops out. And with that, I think I'm going to head off for now, because it's super duper late. Or super duper early, depending on how you want to look at it. So, until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.